This time, let us prepare for the Bureau Fire Protection qualifying exam. This exam is for the Fire Officer 1 as part of their application process. So, in this presentation from Walden University, let us improve our verbal ability by studying the subject-verb agreement rules. This is from Walden University. Subject-verb agreement rule number 1. If the subject is singular, the verb must be singular too. Example, she writes every day. She is the subject, which is singular, and the verb also singular. So, verb must be in the form with an S, base form plus letter S. Then that is singular. Except when using the singular they, that's a pronoun they. So, use plural verb form. If it is a verb in plural form, base form of the verb without S. So, singular, if the subject is singular, then the verb must be singular too. If the subject-verb agreement rule number 2, if the subject is plural, the verb must also be in plural form. Example, they write every day. The subject they is a pronoun which is plural. We do not know how many people are there, but it is plural. There are more than one person. So they write every day. Sometimes, however, it seems a bit more complicated than this. So let us go. Subject-verb agreement rule number 3. When the subject of the sentence is composed of 2 or more nouns or pronouns connected by N, so use plural verb. Again, if there are 2 or more subject of the sentence, 2 or more subject, 2 or more nouns or pronouns connected by N, use a plural verb. Example, the doctoral student and the committee members write every day. So, there are 2 or more nouns connected by N, so use plural verb. Example number 2, the percentage of employees who called in sick and the number of employees who left their jobs within 2 years are reflective of the level of the job of satisfaction. So, that is the subject-verb agreement rule number 3, wherein if 2 or more nouns or pronouns connected by a conjunction and, so use plural verb. Subject-verb agreement rule number 4. When there is one subject and more than one verb, verbs throughout the sentence must agree with the subject. So how is that? When one subject and more than one verb, one subject only but there are 2 or more verbs present, the entire sentence. So example, interviews. So interviews, it's a plural, are one way to collect data and allow researchers to gain an in-depth understanding of participants. So, these verbs must agree with their subject. So, the subject here is interviews. Now, the verb must be in plural form. So, these verbs must agree with the subject. Example number 2, an assumption, a participle an. It means to say singular. An assumption is something that is generally accepted as true and is an important consideration when conducting a doctoral study. So again, when there is one subject and more than one verb, the verbs throughout the sentence must agree with the subject. So if the subject is singular, the verbs must also be in singular form. But if the subject is in plural, the verb must also be in plural form. Now, rule number 5. When a phrase comes between the subject and the verb, remember that the verb still agrees with the subject, not the noun or pronoun in the phrase following the subject of the sentence. How is that? Example, the student, comma, as well as the committee members, comma, is excited. So, here, the subject is only the student. The subject, the rule number 5 here talks about phrase comes between the subject and the verb. There is a phrase between the subject, the student, and the verb is. The phrase is as well as the committee members. Remember that the verb still agrees with the subject, not to the noun or pronoun in the phrase following the subject of the sentence. So, the student as well as the committee members is excited. There is a phrase, the as well as the committee members. The student is the subject and the verb must agree with the subject, which is singular, then therefore is excited. Example number 2, the student with all the master's degrees is very motivated. Still, the student is the subject. And the phrase here, with all the master's degrees, the student is singular, then therefore the verb must be in singular form. In order to determine whether there is a phrase, there will be a preposition. If you will look at example number 1, the preposition is as well as. While example number 2, the preposition is with. That is in between the subject and the verb. So, the verb must always agree with the subject. Example number 3, strategies that the teacher uses to encourage classroom participation include using small groups and clarifying expectations. So, in this example number 3, strategies. Strategies is plural. And in between the strategies and include, there is a phrase that starts with that the teacher uses to encourage classroom participation. So, disregard that phrase and the verb must always agree with the subject. So, strategies, which is in plural form. So, the verb must also be in plural form without S. Next, the focus. Example number 4, the focus of the interviews was 9 purposely selected participants. So, the subject here is only the focus. And then, the phrase is of the interviews. As you can observe in the series of example, the phrase is started with a preposition as well as with that of. So, focus of the interviews. The interviews is not the subject, but it's the focus. The word focus is the subject. So, therefore, your verb must agree with focus, which is singular. Then, therefore, was. The focus of the interviews was 9 purposefully selected participants. So, that is subject-verb agreement rule number 5.